Hey, I'm Ale.
And I'm Andre,
We're both facilitators.
and we do things a bit differently,
These are our memoirs.
and we want you to be a part.
We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is Facilitators Memoirs, where we break the rules and make the magic happen. The art of guiding chaos into clarity, turning dead-end discussions into breakthroughs, and making collaboration actually work. Sounds interesting? Then come join us. Let's get disruptive. All right, Ale. Here we are,
Hello.
ramen restaurant. Just enjoyed a nice bowl of ramen,
And now a beer.
a nice cold
afterwards.
beer, and now we're ready to have a little bit of a conversation.
Let's do it.
And we just decided on the topic for today. In general, we want to be talking about facilitating processes,
Right.
right? In general, I mean, long term, we'll have hopefully a different types of processes, different target groups that we will be kind of highlighting and spotlighting, very much based on our own personal experiences. And anybody that has ever facilitated a group process of any kind knows that the first step is to prepare for that activity.
And we think it's actually a very good way to start our conversations because we're pretty much at the beginning of the process.
Right.
Preparation.
Absolutely. So we're preparing by talking about
Preparation.
Really good, really good. So maybe we can just quickly start by talking about what we mean by facilitating a group, just to
that's
have
how
that
start.
kind of clarified. So what do you understand by facilitating a group process?
Yeah. So every single time that we are doing facilitation all together, in my mind, what we're trying to do is make a process more simple for a group of people. They might already have their objectives clear. They might already be clear about what they want to achieve, or they might just be a group of people that come together for whatever reason, and they have also specific objectives, right? So our process or our task is basically to sit with them, understand that objective, and make it simple for them to achieve the objective altogether. So facilitation for groups would be something like that for me. How is it for you, Andre?
I would say pretty much the exact same thing. There's a process that's supposed to take place, and a group of people who are trying to get together and achieve something in a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
And I think the fields of work that we both work in are very different,
Yeah.
but we have a lot of similarities that can be shared, right? Differences too,
Indeed.
naturally, but also we're trying to find also similarities between it. So to put it shortly, I nowadays work more with kids and youth. So the interesting part of that is oftentimes the kids and the youth aren't really aware of where the process is going or where they want to go.
That's
Sometimes
right.
they don't even want to go anywhere, and that's
Exactly.
only in my mind,
Yeah.
and they're just there. You know what I mean?
They just
So-
go for the right.
Yeah, they're just there for the ride. They just show up. So
They
to
show
say.
up, exactly. They're
they-
waiting for you to tell them what to do.
A lot of the times they are, and then they're surprised when I don't tell them what to do.
Exactly, exactly. You were supposed to let us know.
It's kind of what they're accustomed to from
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Somebody telling them what to do, and then maybe this is already going a step too far, but a little teaser, I guess. I don't tell them what to do, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
the fun begins. Then the process begins. But how is it with your field of work?
And in my case, I normally do it with organizations and then also people that already are a little bit more comfortable with the idea of facilitation or workshops altogether, let's say like that. But in their cases, in many cases, they are expecting actually something very structured. They want to get at the objective very clear in a very succinct amount of time. And they also get mad if I don't come with everything totally prepared, right? They actually are expecting me, or they see the expertise, they base the expertise into whether the person is capable or not to deliver the objective at the end of the process, right? So they want to know what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, and how we're going to be getting over there. And then they also get a little bit mad if I don't do it the way that they are expecting. But they're very happy when they actually connect in a more human way at the end of the process altogether.
Interesting. So you're saying basically one difference already between me working with kids and youth and you working with adults in general, in a business environment as well,
Exactly.
specifically, or a non-profit. You also work with non-profits, organizations. You've said, right?
Exactly.
Is that your target group, the adults, come into the process having very clear expectations.
And high expectations
And
sometimes.
high expectations. And very already defined, probably, expectations a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
Of not just where they want to go, but also how they want to get there.
And how they identify a person that is an expert from a non-expert in the field altogether, right?
Which is something in society that has also become kind of important, right? People will only, or a lot of times people only listen to you if they deem you to have a certain expertise in that field.
And they connect expertise to structure also. They connect the expertise to knowing exactly how to get to the point without going into too many rambling around, right?
And I wouldn't say that the kids and youth that I work with don't have any expectations, but I would say they're not as well defined.
That's true, exactly. That's what I
So
was
if I'm
saying.
having a math lesson, so to say, they know it's about math. They might know it's about a certain topic, but I don't think they're really expecting necessarily what they want to achieve that day, how they want to get there, what problems they're going to have to, deal with along the way, what outputs they want to have learned by the end of the session.
But they want to learn.
And also, oftentimes they're not even really yet capable of this because they're very much used to environments like the general school environment that most schools function by, where they have somebody telling them what they should be learning, how they should get there, how much time they have for it, and really it's not their responsibility to think about these things. So it's also kind of conditioned that they're not expecting it.
That's right.
So to say. Whereas your position is more, you have these expectations in the room from the very beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's basically where we come a little bit to the part of preparation, because in both those cases, preparation becomes very important for the participants and then also for us, because we need to know, or we want to know, or let's even put it a little bit in a different level. We want to have control over the process in a way or another, so that we can also prepare for anything that could happen during the session altogether. And participants are also expecting that control is coming from us altogether as facilitators, right?
I think control is a very important key word there, because it's the loss of control that makes people uncomfortable, generally in life.
Exactly. It's chaos. It's chaos. And you don't want chaos.
It's uncertainty, and dealing with uncertainty is difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and I think the kids have less of that problem of uncertainty because they're not judging the situation. They're not judging the situation based on certain expectation levels they already have.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit more open to the process.
To what could happen, exactly.
Right.
What could happen altogether.
And are a little bit more just there for the ride, as you put.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you do it then in your case, Andre? How do you prepare altogether?
Right. So today we wanted to highlight a little bit the way that, given our different fields of work, how do we prepare for facilitating these target groups? How it is with me is very much based on experiences I've made over the last years of me doing this work.
Yeah.
To put it into framework, I'm generally doing educational work outside of the main school system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which gives me a lot more freedom to structure it in different ways than for example, 45-minute lesson plan with a predefined topic, right? So I have more degrees of freedom to work with. Also different formats to work with.
Yeah.
So that already puts me in a bit of a different position in terms of preparation.
Yeah.
Because I have a little bit more of a say on how I want to prepare.
Yeah.
Whereas in a school, a teacher may be a little bit more locked into a certain framework of, okay, I have this topic, I have a certain amount of time, I have these certain prerequisites also of what I need to do with the kids in terms of the school system, curriculum. So that really it has a big influence on the preparation.
Yeah.
It puts also, it's a limiting factor on the preparation. It gives you less degrees of freedom than what I have to work with. So just to clarify that context. I found that facilitating processes with kids and youth works best for me when I prepare with more of a focus not on the content that I want to go through on that day, but more of the flow of the event, the flow of the activities.
And what do you mean by the flow, Andrew?
So, something that I learned very early on in my career is that if I'm preparing for an event to go a certain way,
Yeah.
and from the beginning of the event, I noticed that the people that came that day are different to what I had prepared for,
That's true.
then all of a sudden I feel like my plans aren't going to work.
Right. Okay.
And then I'm in a bit of a dilemma, because then either I let go of my plans
Yeah.
or I forcefully hold on to my plans
Exactly.
and try to box them through at whatever cost.
Yeah.
And that's something I never felt comfortable with. And I also felt like I was losing a lot of potential in terms of what I was able to achieve with the kids and youth that I'm working with. And what I ultimately do, I have an engineering background. I studied mechanical engineering, so ultimately I'm all about efficiency. So
Yep.
I have basically a certain amount of time
Yep.
with a group of kids, and I want to make the most of that time.
That's right. Yeah.
And in my experience, I get the most out of that time with the specific group of kids if I leave certain things open,
Okay. Interesting.
right? So not to give away too much, but I definitely don't overplan.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so I plan a rough framework, a rough structure, and within that rough structure, I try to leave degrees of freedom for
Right.
things to go whatever way they go.
Yeah. And do you prepare that timing a lot for
Right.
that?
So I'm not preparing as much the content
Yeah.
or the methods.
Yep.
I'm more preparing, that's what I meant with flow.
Yeah.
More of like a timeline,
Right. Okay.
right? So where do I kind of want to be with the group after 30 minutes have passed?
That's
or
right.
after
So with
15 minutes have passed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So generally I like to start with, okay, the first 15 minutes, if it's a group that doesn't know each other yet, I want there to be a group. I want the group to feel like a group.
Right.
So, for example, I just recently had a vacation course.
Okay.
So we have vacations in Germany, fall vacation, Herbstferien, and I had a workshop that went on for a couple of days called Mathe im Leben,
Yeah.
math in life,
In life.
right? So one of my big subjects is math and science, and trying to make it more accessible to young people.
Yes.
And show them really what that has to do with our everyday lives. Okay, so what I have there is a group of kids that don't know each other yet,
Exactly.
or maybe they've seen each other because they go to the same school, but they've never been in a class setting or a group setting together.
The connection is not so strong.
There's
still.
no connection yet.
Yeah.
They're different age groups. They have different views of what mathematics is, and different personalities.
Yep.
And my first objective is, how can I get a sense of togetherness?
That's right. Yeah.
So what I'm doing is, what are my kind of key points of how I can get to that togetherness?
In the most efficient way, with the amount of time that you have, with the resources that you have. Very good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll have like an activity. For example, one of my best practices is, wie wollen wir miteinander umgehen, is what it is in
Yes.
German. So how do we want to act in
One
the group
another.
with one another?
Yeah.
And I found it works very well when you do that with the group.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I want you to respect each other, I want you to listen to each other.
Give it
It's
the
really
rules.
important that we respect the materials that we use. I asked the group of kids
Yeah.
and youth, what's important to you?
Yeah.
And then naturally, most of those topics that I have in my mind that I think are important will come from the kids.
Naturally from them organically.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I have those prepared.
Yeah.
So I have it prepared, but I'm preparing not that I'm going to say this in an efficient amount of time
Right.
and then we move on. I'm preparing a certain amount of time, say 10 minutes, for me to discuss this with the group
Right.
and be open to the fact that they will contribute and make it part of their own. And that process forms a group on its own.
That already explains very well the part of how you can prepare and at the same time be open to things that can happen in the session, right? Because you have it with you, but instead, for example, of preparing a presentation, a PowerPoint, or just giving it to the people, you're basically telling them you can create it on your own, and I will complement that process with something that I already prepared.
Right. It's basically co-creation.
It's a co-creation
So
process.
I'm doing co-creation with them.
That's right.
Although I have in my mind where I want to go, I'm not giving that information.
Yeah.
I'm facilitating a co-creation process that will get to that information.
That's right. Yep.
That will get to that objective of this is how clarifying how we want to act with each other. But the way we get there is something I can't plan.
Exactly.
I don't know what kids are going to be there. I've never met these kids before most of the time. So I'm meeting them for the first time. They're meeting each other for the first time. So I don't know if they know it's important to respect each other or to listen to each other.
That's true. Exactly.
That's something that's uncertain that I don't know. So I'm not planning for them knowing that or me saying that. I'm planning for the framework. I'm planning for I'm going to take 10 minutes of time to discuss this with them. And we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I start my planning process.
And I'm thinking right now, for our listeners that are thinking right now, together with both of us, and especially with Andre, yes, but efficiency would be you take 5 minutes to just tell them the information and move forward, right? In reality, what we're discussing is not about the efficiency of just doing that, but we're talking about the efficiency of the long-term commitment that the kids are going to be having during the whole day, right?
That's it.
They're going to commit to that because they were the ones saying it, not us, right?
So basically, by giving space for the process and not the result, not putting the result in the focus, but giving space for the process and having a focus on the process, and opening it for co-creation for them to contribute, it's become their workshop. It's no longer my workshop that I'm doing for them. It's their workshop that we're doing together.
Exactly. It's a commitment of everyone together at the same time.
And all of a sudden, I've achieved way more in those 10 minutes than I would have achieved if I'm just giving the information. I've created a group setting, I've created an atmosphere of togetherness, and I've also created clarity on how we want to act with each other. And also a responsibility. Every child now feels responsible to those codes because they said it. They said it's important to them. And they will remember that much clearer than if I told them that it's important.
Exactly. Because there was no authority telling them. It was basically a commitment that came from all of them at the same time.
And is that something that works in your setting too, or do you do it differently?
In a way, very much. You work a little bit with the part of the flow of the activities, which is something that I also pretty much do very often. In a very, I would say, challenging way for adults to do it in a way that they do not expect it, so a little bit more subverting the process. But there's also something that I have learned during the period of time working also as a facilitator, many years already, of doing these kind of processes for different type of populations, that is also super valuable. And I can actually explain it from the point of view of not what I do right now, but basically what I used to do before. I tended to think that, I told you a little bit at the beginning, right? The part of reputation was very important, right? And reputation was connected to knowledge. Knowledge was connected to preparing. And all this process basically meant that you had to know what time you're going to be using for which activity, which is going to be the objective, and how that objective is going to be connected to the whole big objective of the whole session. So a big temptation that we as facilitators tend to have, and I went through that process also why I'm saying it now, is that we think that we have to include as many activities as possible to present as many frameworks as possible so that people can understand many different things about the topic. And
so basically quantity over quality.
Quantity over quality, exactly. That the more information that we give them, the better the session is going to be. And in reality, I hope many of our listeners are already saying, like, which is the mistake that we can learn from this. Reality tells us that just like Andrew was telling us right now, the resource of time is very limited. Very limited. And you have to know how to go around the process altogether of the timing and the process of the dynamic of people. Meaning that you might not have time for every single activity, but what you have to have very clear in your mind is essentially what is the message that you want to give the participants that they can leave this workshop with. And I tend to now turn it into what exactly do I want participants to know by the end of the session that is going to be super valuable for them. And it could be that it's only 2-3 things that are totally new, and the rest is basically just reinforcements of something that they knew. But just those simple ideas are going to stick better in their mind rather than just having all possible, let's say, bowl of spaghetti of information that they cannot actually process altogether. So having very clear or preparing altogether very well the messages that you want to have during the workshops and trying to repeat them as often as possible so that idea can stick also into our mind and they can basically go along the session for that, and you can even make the joke in the process, right? Like, if you forget anything from this workshop, and I hope you actually forget everything from the workshop, remember this one specific sentence.
Sure.
Exactly.
What could that be, though? Like, can you give an example of what?
And it could be,
that
for example, a sentence. It could be a phrase. It could be, for example, also a very specific framework that we want to use during the training. But you can actually take many different frameworks and try to explain them. But if you just take one specifically, you can basically say like, hey guys, this is not the only one that exists, but we're going to take it just to understand a little bit of a part of the topic altogether. And if you want to know more about the topic, then you can basically give them also other resources that they can use, and they can go deeper into the process. It's not our task for them to have all the comprehensive possibilities of all they can do with it. It's our task to basically just create something that they can actually use immediately after the
something of
session.
value that they can take from that experience.
Exactly.
But do you have, like, from your recent facilitation processes, like one message you have in like memory, like what?
Yeah.
Just like a concrete example.
When I work with organizations, I normally work with the team dynamic of people that are in the teams. And the team dynamic is something that is quite interesting because there's plenty of ways to understand leadership, how to understand emotional intelligence, how to understand like different processes that can happen. One of the processes that is very tempting to explain is, for example, when you talk about emotional intelligence, to go into the process of how emotional intelligence works from the point of view of realizing that you have an emotion, processing the emotion, understanding the signals that you have from that emotion, and then basically doing something on top of that, right? Mm-hmm. And if you go into many different frameworks, there's many different ways that you can understand that process, right? Even from the point of psychology, from the point of of science altogether, that you can go. But it's not so useful to explain it in a way that is actually a framework. It's more expressive. It's more simple to do it in a team dynamic of people together at the same time, and basically just go and see the emotions that are happening in the moment when we're having the session, right? So if you identify, for example, as a facilitator that for whatever reason we start the session and people are very tired, then you use this tiredness as something that you can basically inspire others into how can we use that tiredness into understanding the process, right, altogether. So for example, nowadays that I'm doing it also for companies, I tend to, just like you were saying also at the beginning, identify which are the emotions or which are the feelings that people are having at the very beginning of the session, and then using that information to inspire and to basically explain frameworks in a more simple way, and even make it very personal, right? Because then you can say like, hey, like you have this one person that was telling us about this emotion, and then you can work with that emotion all together, right? Instead of you basically just like you were saying, presenting something very nice that people do not connect to, but then if you make a joke about a person that is also in the conversation.
Wenn hier 3 Personen rankommen würden. Ansonsten hat es dann.
In 10 Minuten wäre das okay.
Ja, okay, alles gut.
Danke sehr.
Dankeschön.
So for that, in the case that you want to present something and you want to just basically say that the process works A, B, and C, if you actually say, as you see it in the process, in the conversation that we had, this one person was saying about this, and then you connect it to another person, people remember the people that were in the conversation, instead of just talking about a framework that is very subjective, is very abstract altogether, and that makes it by far more simple to understand. Once again, then, a combination between preparing something, knowing what you want to do, but then relying also on what's going to happen in reality, in the present when we're having the workshop altogether, and try to take the advantage of the two parts of the process.
So there we already have a similarity, despite working with different target groups. We're both trying to use the potential of the space and the people that are there on that present day.
That's right.
Who we don't know beforehand how they're going to be, who they're going to be, what they're going to bring. So we how do you prepare for that?
You can only think about preparation from a point of view of how much control can I have during the session,
Right.
how
what
much
can I control,
exactly,
right?
and how much do I feel comfortable giving the control up to the people, right? And if you are comfortable with that and you send the message the right way also at the beginning of the session, people understand it. I have also discovered, and we both have shared that experience, that you tell people you guys are the ones who are leading the process,
Right.
and people feel comfortable about that if you do it right? Because they know that they are being guided, but at the same time they are encouraged to do something for themselves.
And would you also say that it's almost like almost a shock moment sometimes, but also most of the time I feel like a refreshing moment for the participants when they hear that they're able to contribute to the process.
That's right.
And they're just not along for the ride.
Yeah.
Would you say that's also the same?
I think the magical process here is to let everyone know that there is an agenda, that there is something that is prepared, but that this agenda is flexible enough to include anyone and all the experiences that are on the table. And I think that becomes by far more valuable because the session becomes not something that is coming from an authority, being the facilitator, but it's actually coming more from the relationships that are going to be growing during the workshop. And I think from that point of view, we have realized very often, the two of us, Andre, that after our sessions, people want to talk and they do not want to leave the space, right?
Sure,
because they make connections that are by far more valuable than what could have happened if it would have been only one-sided, right? And that is super valuable together because the conversation doesn't stop in the workshop, it continues, like life, right?
Yeah. So, to get back to my Math and Life, Mathe und Leben course, there is a difference between how we work because you have this message that you're trying to get across, right?
Exactly.
So your process is ultimately guided by a certain message that you want to bring across throughout the process. And for me, it's more about facilitating an experience.
That's right.
So for my Mathe und Leben course, many of the listeners may have felt the same way or have heard of the stereotype that math is something that's not fun all the time. It's quite dry. It's not for everyone. Math phobia is a real thing. People are actually scared of math.
Of it. Yeah, of course.
And a lot of kids go through that experience because of the way that math is presented in schools and also the pressure that comes with it and the importance that's put on it, the pressure that comes with that importance. And my goal is not a certain message that I want to bring across, but more of a connection between math and a positive experience.
That's right. Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what they're doing, as long as it's for them a context of math and they have a good time, then I know that in their mind they're going to connect math with something positive.
And even there you have actually a very nice message that you want to make across. Math can be fun altogether, right?
Right,
in a way.
but it's not from a message, take this away point of view.
That's right.
It's from didn't you just enjoy what we did the last 3 hours? Oh, yeah? Well, that was math.
That was math,
whether
exactly.
you believe me or not.
Yeah.
And then to have kids tell me after 3 days, what can I improve in the workshop? I always ask for feedback.
Yeah.
What went well? What can I improve? And what's one thing I learned? Those are the 3 questions I always ask for feedback. And oftentimes the kids say nothing for what can be improved, but oftentimes they also say more time.
Yes, exactly.
It wasn't long enough.
Yes,
and
exactly.
to have that in combination with math, something that has this negative connotation for a lot of young people, is the goal of my workshop.
We do not have so many kids that are actually requesting for more math classes or more lessons like that. Exactly.
Right.
That means that we are doing something positive.
That gives me goosebumps. That's something I think that's really powerful, and that's my driving force. So I think you put it well. How do I prepare for that? I think about what can I control?
Yeah.
And what can I do to give this process as much freedom as needed?
Yeah.
And as little structure as possible.
That's right, yeah.
But structure is needed.
It's needed. It is indeed. Because it brings us a little bit to the process of what might be happening now with our podcast. We are right now putting the little seed on the ground for something to grow.
Right.
And we trust that the process is actually going to make it grow into something beautiful.
Absolutely.
But we do not know.
Yeah.
We're just basically putting that seed right there and just trusting that the process and the people that are going to be engaged into the process is going to make it beautiful. That's why we're also starting like this today, having a little bit of a try out of what could be a taste of our podcast, and then trusting also that the people that are going to be listening to us there in the void outside are also connecting a little bit to what we're saying today and want to know a little bit more about that for the next time. Right,
And
Andres?
I would say we prepared for this the same way we've been talking about how we prepare for our other processes. So
together with a beer, having a little conversation before, and just getting recorded.
A little bit of structure and a lot of freedom, and see where it takes us. And we're here for the experience, and the message is clear. Preparation is something that maybe doesn't have to be as big of a factor in terms of having everything, every minute planned of the activity.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a takeaway message maybe that we're giving the audience is there's a lot of potential and value in giving freedom in processes and trying to facilitate a group of people with their potential in the focus.
That's right.
So what are they bringing, which is not something that I can prepare for, always. But how can we make the most of the people and the time and the space that we have at that given day?
And if I can add to that process, what Andre is saying also on this is also follow your emotions when you are doing the session. Because if you are feeling a little bit afraid that time is running by, that things are not going the way that you want it to, you can also trust that fear can turn into something beautiful, can turn into a very interesting collective experience that you cannot control, but can also be very, very efficient altogether.
Right. And if I think you do it the way that we're talking, the goal is no longer a certain amount of content that you've transferred to the participants,
but the experience.
But the experience that you shared with them. And I always tell the kids, I'm just another member of our group.
Yep, exactly.
And they look at me with big eyes and they're like, what?
You're supposed to be the one who knows.
But a day later, it's like natural to them.
Yeah, exactly.
They've accepted it already and they feel comfortable with it. And I am just a part of their group.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to watch how it works, regardless of who the kids and youth are. And it's something that has withstood the test of time for me. But to be honest, it's something that I think we just started to touch on.
Yeah.
And we may have to get back to again.
At some point, when we continue all together.
And also, I think there's a lot of other topics that we may have to get to.
We definitely have a whole backlog that we have to discuss.
Yeah.
But preparation and start is a very good way to start altogether.
Right. And I think we prepared quite well. And we gave this whole idea a kickstart.
That's right.
And let's see where it takes us.
Let's see where it takes us. Thank you very much for listening to us for the first time. And let's hope for this one to be the first of many, many, many other shows of our podcast altogether. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Take care. Bye-bye.